About a year ago, I was looking for things to do in New Jersey that could take me away from the boredom and monotony of everyday life. Given that it was winter, I had been spending most of my free time for the past few months indoors, cooped up either on my computer or reading books. New Jersey, and especially my part of New Jersey, is not exactly an eventful place during the winter. Indeed, a lot of the recreational activities in New Jersey revolve around its beaches and Six Flags Great Adventure, neither of which were exactly an option in the winter. Eventually, I settled on finding a nice trail to take a relaxing walk on. Something about a winter hike sounded particularly enticing to me, although in the moment I couldn't quite articulate why. As I researched my options for where to go, I found myself diving into an unexpectedly strange selection criteria. I began looking at maps of cryptid sightings in New Jersey, thinking that if I were to take a solo walk through the woods, I'd want to ensure any potential encounters would be as exciting as possible. Admittedly, this was a rather strange approach. While I've always been fascinated by cryptids and cryptozoology, I don't really believe in most of the reported sightings of creatures like Bigfoot or Mothman. To me, they're usually just cases of mistaken identity, deliberate false claims for fame, or games of telephone that turn everyday oddities into urban legends. And yet, as I studied the map, I found myself considering my options as if encountering such creatures were not only an actual possibility, but even a guarantee. I thought to myself, well, the Jersey Devil is maybe the most famous cryptid we have here, and the Pine Barrens are so big that maybe he has the best chances of lurking around there somehow. But if the Jersey Devil is real, I thought to myself, that would be too disagreeable to my current worldview. If I were to encounter such a creature, I would have to question many aspects of my life, including my faith, which would all just be too uncomfortable. Instead, I opted for an area in North Jersey where some of the cryptid sightings felt less disruptive to my worldview, among which were Red Eyes, a Bigfoot adjacent, the Lizard Man, the Mantis Man, and the Faceless Creatures. All creatures that, in some way or another, I could justify to myself more as an anomaly of evolution than a malevolent beast that defies all of what I believe to be true. And while I didn't have the pleasure, or displeasure, of encountering any strange creatures on my walk, I did really enjoy my hike. Something I came to appreciate while I was out there was how uniquely alone I was in that moment. It didn't occur to me before then, but as a suburban resident, there aren't really many times that I spend alone. Even when driving alone, you're almost always surrounded by other human beings who are all, to some degree, aware of your existence and, technically, directly affected by it. After all, just by the nature of you being another car on the road, you command a certain level of awareness, as you have to be aware of the cars around you to avoid hitting them. Even out in the woods on my own, I was never actually truly isolated. I had my phone with me, and even beyond that, there were people out there somewhere who were, even if not actively thinking about me, at least somewhat aware of my existence. And in some sense, cryptids are uniquely alone. Like the isolation I felt on my hike, cryptids are often depicted as unique and one of a kind. The Mothman is not often thought to be an undiscovered species, but rather a unique instance of something strange. They are often not thought to have friends or family, not that we usually even think about them in that way, and cruelly enough, they don't even have the benefit of being fully known to us, and something about that unique type of loneliness is really sad. And maybe thinking that a degree of human awareness of a creature's existence is in any way meaningful to the creature is a little arrogant or species elitist of me. And more importantly, it's a little silly of me to feel sad at the thought of a perceived loneliness of a genre of creatures whose existence is definitionally dubious. But it raises an interesting question. Why do we choose to, in our perceptions and theories about these creatures, depict them as inherently lonely? There could be many explanations. Maybe the uniqueness of being a one-of-a-kind is a drawing factor for many people, kind of like discovering a legendary Pokemon. Or maybe it seems more plausible that there could be a single evolutionary freak of nature out there, roaming in the woods somewhere, whereas the idea of there being a whole family or species makes us skeptical of the ability of the creatures to stay hidden for so long. Perhaps there's also an element of existential solitude that makes these creatures even more captivating. In a world brimming with known life, the thought of a creature's existence outside the boundaries of our understanding, without any peers or witnesses, heightens its mystique. It becomes not just a creature, but a symbol of something isolated, something lost in the margins of reality. The idea that these cryptids are alone in the vastness of nature might speak to our own fear of isolation, of being overlooked or forgotten, even by the world we inhabit. Cryptids tend to blur the line between animal and monster, although usually leaning more towards the monster side in the way we tend to mythologize them. And it is an unmistakable trait of monsters in the books we write and the stories we tell that they are uniquely evil, and often in that way, alone as well. The solitude of monsters, whether literal or symbolic, serves to highlight their otherness, their inability to connect with the world we know. This isolation, ironically, amplifies their power and elusiveness, transforming them into figures of both dread and intrigue. Just like the cryptids themselves, they are alone because they don't fit, and in that difference, they become all the more compelling for their ability to defiantly resist convention. Cryptids are anomalies, and thus they also represent a certain fascination with the unknown. They are an almost personification of the limitation of humans to know everything. As humans, we enjoy learning more about how the world works around us, and we take pride in being able to classify the animals around us neatly into categories that we designate. Cryptids, however, stand in defiance of that order. They slip through the cracks of our understanding, refusing to be contained by our neatly drawn lines of classification. They remind us that no matter how much we know, there will always be mysteries that elude our grasp, corners of the world that remain untouched, and truths that exist beyond the reach of our comprehension. So, why are we so fascinated by cryptids? Is it because they represent the other, and thus allow us to vicariously defy societal convention? Or perhaps it's because they represent some unknowable facts about the world around us, making the world seem more mysterious? Either of these could serve as satisfactory answers, but I think there might be a little more to it. I enjoy listening to YouTube videos on my long drives back from work, and one of the types of videos I sometimes enjoy playing are cryptid stories or creepypastas. They turn my otherwise boring drive through the wooded part of my trip into something much more exciting. But if you were to ask me how I feel when I'm listening to the stories, I wouldn't say I'm scared or on edge in anticipation. I would say that the word that best encapsulates how I'm feeling is cozy. And while I think cozy may not be the word that first comes to most people's minds, I imagine people who are into similar habits, who watch horror movies or listen to similar videos, may have an idea of what I'm talking about here. And to those who don't, I'll use something a little more universal to try to illustrate my example. Think of a time when you've been outside in the cold, maybe in the middle of winter, when the chill gets into your bones. Perhaps it's raining, or maybe it's a howling snowstorm. The air is crisp and your breath hangs in the air before dissipating. But then you step inside, away from the biting cold, and find yourself enveloped by warmth. You throw on a thick sweater, curl up under a blanket, and feel the contrast between the cold outside and the warm inside. It's a different kind of comfort, one that only comes from being made aware of the cold outside in the first place. There's something about the sharpness of the cold that makes the warmth feel all the more welcoming, even necessary. It's a feeling of being safely contained, of knowing what it's like to be outside that warmth and appreciating the shelter it provides. I think my feelings towards cryptids are pretty similar. Acknowledging the possibility of something unknown gives me comfort. The vastness of the world beyond my bedroom makes me feel more at ease in my small room where everything is exactly where I want it to be. And so I find the idea of cryptids to be weirdly comforting. Even though this is how I feel about cryptids, and I suspect that my feelings about cryptids are probably not completely unique, it is worth mentioning that cryptids seemingly play a different role in today's society than they have historically. For an illustration of this, we need look no further than the early sightings of cryptids in the young and newly formed United States. Indeed, many of the commonly known cryptids here in the US trace their origins to the early 19th and late 18th centuries, a period of time that probably not so coincidentally coincided with US westward expansion. In fact, at least a few of the most famous cryptids have made their debut around the same time, with Bigfoot first appearing in 1811 and the Jersey Devil not too far behind in 1812. We could view these cryptids as a sort of lens through which we can understand a little more about what the settlers must have been feeling during that time. The woods are undoubtedly a terrifying place. In the woods of a newly colonized, vast and mysterious land, even more so. To them, there was so much about the world that was unknown, so much more that was yet to be seen, and that unknown frontier definitely played into the fears of early Americans. But today, cryptids, in many ways, have become a hollow echo of their former selves. Most of the vast wilderness has been explored and documented, at least in America, leaving far less room for the existence of undiscovered creatures. In fact, many modern theories about cryptids are often dismissed as outlandish conspiracy theories, and yet, despite this, the idea of cryptids endures. We even have some more modern cryptids that have come long after the period of westward expansion, with cryptids like Mothman, Chupacabra, the Dover Demon, and many alien sightings all coming out of the late 20th century. As we can see, cryptids continue to persist in a world that seems to have all but ruled out their existence, defiantly holding on to their mystery. In this way, they continue to challenge convention, much like how the literary monster defies societal norms at every turn. Cryptids, then, may be the most monster of all monsters, existing as symbols of resistance to the boundaries of what we think we can know.